in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to do slow motion in Final Cut Pro 10. Now, before we get started, I quickly wanted to say there are two different kinds of slow motion. So the first is overcranking, and that's where your camera is filming at a higher frame rate than you're outputting. So for example, if your camera is at 20 frames a second and your projector is at 10 frames a second, then basically you've achieved half speed slow motion because each frame is going to be shown for twice as long as it was recorded at. The other kind is time stretching. So if your camera is at 20 frames a second and your projector is at 20 frames a second, but you want to show the footage at half speed, you let the computer generate additional frames to go in between the ones you've already shot. So how do we do that in Final Cut? Well, the first kind, overcranking, is quite easy. So here I've got this footage of a beach buggy, and you can see in the inspector that this was filmed at 60 frames a second, but my project is at 25 frames a second. So by default, when I bring this in, Final Cut retimes it so that it plays at normal speed. But in this case, I don't want that. I want it to show at slow motion. So the way you do that is to select the clip, click here on the retime tool, and click automatic speed. Now you can see that Final Cut has automatically applied a slow motion, and it's saying that it's playing at 42%. But you'll notice that it's not added any render bars or anything to the top. This is because all it's done is taken those 60 frames and it's now playing them back at 25 frames a second, which means that it's, it appears to be slow motion. So that's a really nice effect, and what's great about this is a lot of cameras can film at 50 frames a second, and traditionally for web you don't need to output 25 frames a second. So if you're working on a project and you think you might want slow motion, I'd recommend setting your camera to 50 frames, and then you've always got the option of putting it in slow motion. Now my other clip here of these two motorbikes jumping through the air, if we look at the inspector, it was shot at 25 frames a second, and my project's 25 frames a second. So if I come to the retime tool and click automatic speed, nothing happens. It stays at 100% because that is the frame rate it was shot at. So how do I slow it down? Well, I can come back to the retime tool here and set it to 50% speed. But you'll see this time I have the render indicator here. And that's because in order to achieve the slow motion effect, the computer's going to need to generate additional frames in between the two. So if I play that now, you'll see that it is in slow motion. It's a little bit stuttery, but it's done a pretty good job at managing to create the additional frames needed to make slow motion happen. So we can also slow this down more, so we can go to 25%. And you can see now that it is sort of stuttering as it goes between each frame. So if you wanted to try and improve that, you can select the clip here, come back to the retime tool, and on video quality, you can see there's a couple of options. So there's normal, frame blending, and optical flow. And basically all you need to know is that the quality goes up as you go through these. So let's see what happens with frame blending. Now I don't know if you can see this on the YouTube video, but it's sort of creating a ghosting effect. So you can see here, if I zoom in on that, you can see here how he's sort of got four legs because it's trying to basically blend the different frames together. So that's not worked wonderfully here, although it has made it less stuttery. So the other kind is optical flow, which is the most complex form. So what's going to happen here is the computer's going to try and analyze the motion in the frame and then intelligently reposition the pixels to generate new frames. So let's play that. And you can see on this clip it is struggling a little bit to do it. but it is quite tricky to slow down to 25%. So what I'd suggest is, if you're doing this, just have a play with those different quality settings and see which one works best. And bear in mind, the more you try and slow something down, the harder it'll be. You can also speed footage up. So by the way, to change the speed, you can either click up here or click here. We can also put it in fast speed, so we can go at 2x. And you can see that we get sort of a sped up effect. Or we can click normal to put it back. The other way is that you can click on the edge of the handle there, and you can see that I can actually stretch the footage. So if I need to fill a specific amount of time in the timeline, I can just drag that in. Now another thing that's really cool is that you can combine the slow motion with the range tool. So if I reset this, and now I'm going to press R on my keyboard to choose the range tool, and I'm going to select from when they first go in the air to just before they land. So I've now got this section selected, and I can come up here and set that to slow motion. And you can see what's happened is that Final Cut has kept the start of the clip at 50%, at normal speed, and then it's ramping down to 50%, and then it ramps back up again. So it creates a nice smooth fade. So if we look at that, you can see they're slow at the top, and then they speed back up as they hit the ground. So you can do some really interesting effects with this. There's also some other tools in here, so you can do a speed ramp, you can do an instant replay type thing. So I'll show you the instant replay because I like that one. So if I clear my selection there, do reset speed, and now just drop my playhead there and do instant replay 50%. You'll see what happens is it comes back, shows a little graphic saying instant replay, and it's slowed it down. That's pretty useful if you're doing sort of sports events. Makes it really easy. If you don't want the title, you can just disable it or change it. That's fine. So yeah, that's some of the different ways that you can do slow motion in Final Cut Pro 10. I'd recommend just having an experiment with this menu here and see what works well for you.